Hey gang, Dr. G here, Imaginarium. So are dreams wish fulfillments? Are they wishes? Want to know how to freak somebody out you don't know? Tell them you had a dream about them. Mm. And you ever wonder why that's so cringy? Well, it's because of this underlying idea that dreams are wishes. Like if you have a dream about somebody and whatever it is that you're doing, it's because that's what you secretly wish for. This is an idea that's kind of in our collective consciousness. It's been around for a while. I would say I would attribute it to Freud in the 1900s. Um, well, in 1900, he published the Interpretation of Dreams, very famous book, very influential, in which he laid out his theory that dreams are primarily wish fulfillments. They're fantasies about what I want. And the reason why you don't see something straightforwardly presented as such is because of this thing called the dream sensor, which he talks about. Later, that became the superego. And the dream sensor is there to disguise what we want because, most of our wishes are naughty and, well, we just can't have that. And if we if we just dreamed about straightforwardly what we wanted, we would wake up suddenly with this urges of the id, coursing through us. And so he proposed that dreams are there to guard sleep, to keep us from shooting up in a pulse of whatever. So now, to be fair to Freud, he did pull back from this idea in his more mature writings, and he developed a much more sophisticated way of looking at dreams. Jung, whom I'm more familiar with, actually broke off from Freud around this time frame, and so developed his own theory about what dreams are all about. But then there's another reason to back away from this idea of dreams being wish fulfillments is because the roughly 100 years or so of empirical dream research doesn't really show this either. Now, dreams can be wishes. They can be if you're talking about a dream where you're primarily planning for the future and trying to construct a future that you want. So there is going to be that dimension to some dreams. But a lot of times dreams are not just wishes and they're not about what you want. They're about more what the world is doing right now or what you are doing right now, how you are making your way through the world right now. Not so much about what you're wishing for. Nevertheless, this idea is still sneakily in the background. There's even the famous Disney movie, Cinderella. Now, granted, that's an old movie, but there's the song in there where Cinderella literally sings, "A dream is a wish that our heart makes." So it's still there in the background. And of course, it's in these conversations where people immediately assume that you had a dream. It's because of something that you're wishing for. But see, this is not really how dreams work. And the way that dreams work are more to do with the psyche constantly trying to piece together what everything means. In other words, all the stuff that's happened to me up to this point, with a strong emphasis on what recently has happened to me, since it is more relevant, will feed into this process. And it'll take memory consolidation, which happens also around the same time that we're dreaming. There's also memory consolidation going on too. But the dream takes it one step further and says, not only is this what has happened to me, I'm going to construct a new narrative based on that by breaking down the memories, reorganizing them into imaginary narratives to give me a symbolic picture of what has been going on in my life more recently. So if I'm having a dream where I'm reaching a crossroads in the dream, it's not because I literally walked around in the woods and found a trail that there was a crossroads at the trail. It's not necessarily because of that. In fact, it usually isn't. It has more to do with the fact that you're at a more metaphorical crossroads. Like you'll have that dream if you're facing a big choice in your life. This happens a lot in therapy dreams, actually. Crossroads, different paths. In fact, there's a whole way of looking at dreams that have to do with using the metaphor that life is like a journey. Whereas even though you may not physically be moving around anywhere, your dreaming mind will take your life and treat it as if it were a journey and throw different things on the path to represent various obstacles and challenges that you might be facing in your life. So it's a symbolic narrative. It's a symbolic narrative, moreover, that is intensely focused on what is emotionally relevant. So I think a lot of times where the so-called bizarreness of dreams comes about is because of the metaphorical nature of it. But the emotional intensity of it, people frequently notice that. And they then will kind of revert back to this idea that the emotionality is about what we're secretly wishing for. And there is a little bit of I think, thrill that people find in contemplating this, that, you're harboring these deep, dark secrets and you're even hiding them from yourself and all that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff can happen, but usually dreams aren't really about that particular kind of process. It has more to do rather than what's going on in my life right now, how challenging is it, how difficult is it for me, and how much trouble am I having with it, and how can I make sense of it, most importantly. How can I make sense of it? How can I take all the stuff that's going on in my life and manufacture a imaginary narrative that summarizes it all, and then from there I will progress on to whatever comes next. We do this in dreams. We also do this in what's something they call spontaneous thought, where you're just sort of sitting there not doing anything in particular, and thoughts and images and patterns will pop up into your head unbidden. With the content of that, as the research is showing, we're learning a whole lot more about this process now, and the default mode network and all that kind of thing, is that it's focused on the same kind of stuff that the dreams are. In fact, there's a lot of theorists out there now that are saying that spontaneous thoughts and dreams are not only connected, but you can just look at dreaming as an intensified kind of spontaneous thought process. And that both processes are really very similar, if not the same process, and they're working on problem solving. Not only problem solving, future planning, and emotional consolidation, bringing it all together, right? So integration. Now, the psychoanalysts have been saying this for many, many years, of course. But now we've got the empirical research and the neuroscience to show that, at least in that respect, they were on the money there. They were right. They were right about that. So that's useful to know. So the long story short is, dreams are not usually wish fulfillment dreams. They're not usually just blanket statements of I want X. In particular, traumatic dreams are really hard to justify with that. If you're having dreams of being traumatized over and over again, it's really hard to explain why that would be a wish, because the person clearly does not want to be traumatized again. Rather, what's really going on is their mind is saying, that was a really horrible thing. How can I make sense of it? How can I understand what really happened so that I don't encounter that again? So I've got to revisit the past. This leads to a very curious phenomenon that you see not only in therapy, but in research. And that is, if you are in a traumatized state, or if you're dealing with lots of anxiety or depression, dreams are actually easier to interpret than when you're not. And it's because when you have a whole lot of pressure on a particular person, the dreaming process, since it's a problem solving and integrating process that we all naturally have, it's going to narrow the focus down on the stuff that it needs to. And so the scope becomes more narrow. And you see this most acutely in trauma dreams in particular. In those dreams, the focus is so narrow, you're just dreaming about the trauma over and over again, and that's it. On the contrary, though, as you get better and as you become more in tune with yourself and more integrated and more adjusted, then dreams switch over to a more exploratory mode, and it's more about creativity and problem solving from a more exploratory perspective. And so the dreams become less straightforward and a little bit harder to interpret, because they're bringing in so much stuff from seemingly everywhere. And so those can be a little bit more challenging, interestingly enough. So, at the end of the day, then, dreams are a whole lot of things. Sometimes they're wishes, but usually not.